Amy?
Good evening. My question has to do with the academic achievement gap, and we know that that's an issue not only here in Horry County, but across the country. So my question is actually directed toward the representatives from Horry County and Georgetown. How do you see the Common Core standards affecting or impacting the achievement gap?
As I said earlier, I believe that the way that the standards are proposed to be assessed causes students to think and analyze at a higher level than they ever have. And we should be teaching all children to do that. For the first time in history, the southeastern United States has more people of color than whites, and so that's something that we need to address, and unfortunately those people of color have fallen in, on average, in the lower income strata, and we cannot ignore that. So I don't think that the standards impact that. I think the way we teach, the curricula we use, and the way we assess will impact that achievement gap.
And I'll tell you, I think that early childhood education, because I'm a real proponent for that, and I'll be honest with you, we've got to eradicate gaps early on with our young people, and the disadvantage or the advantage or whatever stigma we put on that. And we've got to very early on understand that we've got to, I heard lots of talk in Horry County, just like we're doing with vocabulary, many things that are going to make a difference. And we've got to do a good job with parenting and bringing our parents on board early on. So I think early childhood education is going to make a tremendous difference for us as we go forward. I'd also like to tell you that I really think the reading initiatives, whether you're on one side or another, or a Read to Succeed or a governor's plan, but I think reading education is something that's going to make an impact, because we're going to see our young people be able to read and understand instead of be word callers or instead of have that vocabulary deficit.
My name is Mary Ellen Green. I have a question that's directed to Dr. Ellsbury and Ms. Hamill, and then the others after they respond. My question is regarding the federal government and collecting student data. I want to know what kind and how often, and what implications are for the school districts. I believe Dr. Smith talked about the data collecting, that people are questioning that. So I'd like to know from you, just what do you have to report and what do they collect?
Well, individualized student reports are not anywhere ever shared that we're actually ever privy to. So I know that that is not part of the data collection. As a total school district, and by school, our data is analyzed because of the federal regulations with the SEA. I will tell you that our real purpose in gathering data is to inform instruction. And data does drive where you help students, but it's not that big chunks of data. It's the ongoing data and the way that we teach children and the way that teachers look at what they have assessed that really drive instruction, not the big pieces. One snapshot in a day and time. It does give us some data, but it does not tell the whole story. So I think we have to be very careful when we talk about data as a big one-time thing.
We don't submit personally identifiable information except to group students and aggregate them by subgroups, because we're required by federal requirements to support on groups. So the data is aggregated, and we don't submit anything that is of an individual student or individual student data or personal information to the federal government.
Mr. Johns?
Yeah. So Common Core itself may not involve, I guess, student data specifically, but to sign on to, or to apply for Race to the Top grant, states had to sign on to one Common Core, and the other was to by the South Carolina's grant, fully implementing a statewide longitudinal data system, in other words, collecting student data. The grant proposal goes on to say that PowerSchool will be implemented to collect data. Some of the examples would be ethnicity, lunch status, socioeconomic factors, English proficiency, migrant status, homeless indicators, discipline and behavior indicators, student-teacher schedules, attendance and truancy records, etc. So as far as whether or not these are going to be shared with the federal government or kept within the state is one thing, but the state in this grant even said that, for one, South Carolina will expand access and use to the data system, will integrate and expand, facilitate where appropriate, create P20 data exchanges, meaning pre-K until after you're in college and into your workforce, among educational agencies and institutes with South Carolina and among other states. So it's not just staying within state, it's staying with other states. As far as Smarter Balance is concerned, Smarter Balance is the assessment that South Carolina signed on to. Its grant with the federal government says Smarter Balance must work with the Department of Education to develop a strategy to make student-level data that results from the assessment available on an ongoing basis for research, subject to applicable privacy laws. Now, there is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, known as FERPA. That's the law that's supposed to say we're keeping all of this data safe and private, but it was amended in the beginning of 2012. Basically, the primary focus was to facilitate disclosure of student info to evaluate the effectiveness of education programs, set out several exceptions to having written parent consent before confidential student information can be given to third parties. They totally changed the definition of education program to now include any program that is principally engaged in the provision of education, including but not limited to early childhood education, post-secondary education, special ed, job training, career and tech education, and any program administrated by an educational agency or institution. So that's super broad. And there's nothing wrong with research in itself, but when we're talking about students, they're not guinea pigs in some, economic development scheme run by the state. These are people, these are students, and these are teachers. And I don't think viewing it as kind of a big data collection and using that data wherever it may go for purposes of the state.
Dr. Smith?
Yeah, there are a couple of bills in the General Assembly. One is on the floor in the Senate, and one should hit the floor of the House of Representatives here in the next week or so, that tighten the screws down on that pretty well as far as what will be shared. That's sort of the question. You just need to be safe about it, to be careful. Why leave anything to chance? So I think if those bills should pass, we'll see our law strengthened in that area.
Thank you. I would like to allow for, you have a follow-up?
Race and gender and ethnicity and free and reduced lunch. We do that already, don't we?
Yes.
So are they asking us to do anything new?
Well, they're telling the state to ramp.
I'm asking Dr. Ellsbury or Ms.
No, it's no different than what we've done in the past.
But they are telling the state to ramp up their data collection. So at least at the state level, they're trying to ramp up data collection.
I would like to allow for one final question. If anybody has a burning question, I would hate for anybody to go home frustrated. The gentleman right there, Lauren, he has his hand up way back there.
Sorry. How you doing, guys? I'm Donald Durham, senior at Coastal Carolina. This is kind of for Ms. Ellsbury. I know we talked a little bit earlier about the achievement gap. Ms. Hamilton mentioned it started with early childhood and parental involvement. First question is kind of where was that parental involvement, and where was their support when we decided to switch to Common Core? Because a lot of parents didn't even know about it. They still don't know about it. In this coming year, when we do implement it, they still won't know about it. But my main question is, if having parental support is so important, what are we doing in Horry County to increase parental knowledge of this change about to occur?
We have put it, we have a link to Common Core on our website, and it contains all kind of resources. It even has some articles that I'm sure these gentlemen have probably read that talk about myths and realities. There's the standards themselves. We have a link to those. We wanted parents to be able to go see what we were asking their children to learn. We have a mobile app that connects parents to the website and all of those resources. So that's one way. That's a good question. We probably don't do a good enough job of doing that but I would say this, that we've changed standards in our state many times, and I don't know that we've had a big communication effort to share that with parents, that the standards have changed. So you may have a good point.
I really think also that parents and are involved at their school levels. And I think we have parent nights, at least in our district, we have parent nights in math and reading. We certainly have a parent cabinet that our superintendent is very, very ongoingly sharing with parents. We share at our board meetings that are public on television about what that really looks like, what the changes are going to be. And I think especially in our schools that we're trying to do a really good job of sharing those strategies that we're using so that we don't end up with some of the concerns that we might otherwise have. But it's real important that we involve everybody in their child's education. And certainly I think we all need to do a really good job with that too.
I better do a follow-up because I hear my principals back there saying that they're doing those. And I was speaking from the district level, but certainly, yes, we do that at this local school level as well.
And I was just going to piggyback on the answer from the principal's point of view. With technology, we understand that a lot of our parents do not have technology, so we do invite them through newsletters to come to the school, to our School Improvement Council meetings. We also invite them when we have awards day or any kind of other something in our schools. We also use our we have a parent link system that we use that call out that hit most of our parents through either the email or by telephone, that give them information that we do have this information, and we do invite them into the schools because we are aware that a lot of them do not have the technology that we use.
How many parents were invited tonight in all your schools? You sent out stuff to all your schools? Yes.
Yes, I have a question. On your...
That's why I invited my friend from River Oaks. Yeah, we're from the public school systems, and it seems if you ask parents about the curriculum, no one knows. My other question is, we're talking about Common Core is a set of standards. I think we all want standards. I think we all want our kids to achieve. We want the best for them. But the thing is, Common Core is a curriculum also because we are teaching to test. I have a first grader right now. We have tests in first grade with percentage grades taught every week. Great rapport with the teachers. The teachers are doing the best job they can. But the thing is, we want a higher level analytical thinking. Coming from a first grade, we need to learn the basic facts first. It is not developmentally appropriate at that age. But now if you look about it, we're going to teach a little bit every year. So by fourth grade, we get there. And if you see at that point, we're almost 2 years behind where we were before with standards. So I think that's what we need to look at. So what we're really doing to children is anxiety. My first grader asked me test-taking strategies because we are already doing that. How can you explain how we're teaching a love of learning and we want what's best for our kids? Because what's going to eventually happen, and I'm an educator also, and not at this moment, and I taught, and I went through an era where we taught whole learning, and that we saw what happened. We did away with phonics, and what happened? We had a whole generation that could not read and decipher words. So my question is now we're changing the whole math for this higher level thinking, and we're teaching kids ways to think like that, but they're not developmentally ready. How can you explain that?
Okay, then I think the question deals, and I've heard this question many times, is the developmental appropriateness of the Common Core standards.
I think the biggest difference that we saw it is not about testing. So I have to beg to differ. It's not about assessment. It's about transfer of learning. It's about having children learn to think and learn to communicate and learn to use vocabulary appropriately in those developmental times. It is not about skills-specific kind of things. Are there specific skills? Yes. But the Common Core is about developmentally appropriate activities that teach children to think at every age, all the way from pre-K through 12, and not just a set of standards that are going to be, we don't offer at a 3rd grade level or a 4th grade level what that's going to look like and expect a 1st grader to react to it. So I think that we're incrementally teaching children appropriately with developmental activities that help them develop skills they need when they become independent readers.
Comments?
The reality is that we know our students, that we know
Dr.
that our,
Ellsbury, please.
we know that our students, when they graduate, will, from either high school or college, will be competing against students from all over the country, all over the world for jobs. And so setting the expectations that we heard Dr. Smith mention earlier high so that our students will be able to compete. That's important for success as an adult. So we start young, we start building toward college and career readiness the minute they walk through our doors. That's our target, and that's our goal.
This gentleman's been waiting very patiently, but I heard my name called out. I know it's within context. Dr.
Really quick, any parents, any teachers, anybody that would like to see how the Common Core works, if 20 of you will commit to 1 hour a week, I will run a workshop, and I will go through the Common Core with you and explain to you how it's benefiting your child or your daughter, and how it's empowering them to love math, to think, to appreciate math, and maybe get a degree in a STEM field.
Thank you for your patience, sir.
You talked about the Common Core is going to allow you to do 15% more adding on to what they have. But when it comes to doing testing, what part of that 15% is going to be on the test? 0, right?
I don't know. We don't know what the assessment will be.
Because what you do outside of the Common Core will not be on the test because the test is the Common Core test. So whatever you do in addition doesn't mean anything because it won't be on there.
We have Smarter Balance now, and I think South Carolina hasn't decided to even use that extra 15%. So it's going to be whatever Smarter Balance says it is.
One little more thing. My granddaughter's in the second grade, and she's learning how to measure by using paper clips. Now, what does it matter with using a ruler? I mean, and my grandson's in kindergarten using jelly beans to count. I mean, where are we going with this?
Right. I'd like to kind of respond with kind of a broad response to kind of both you and the lady who questioned before. You made a great point about parents. Like I said, parents were involved in the process here in South Carolina, and it seems like from a lot of perspectives they still aren't. And you brought up a lot of great concerns, as well he has, as well about the worksheets and the tests and the standards that people are having. But by signing on to Common Core, we can't do anything about that because we've signed off our sovereignty over to this Common Core, which is a group of states that South Carolina can't fix itself. So if South Carolina wants to have good standards, that's great. But South Carolina should have the power to create its own standards and not just sign off on what this big group of states decide. So with that, we should get rid of Common Core now as opposed to 5 years from now. Because we already know 5 years from now, once it's there, we're going to lose money if we don't keep doing it, so it needs to get rid of now. If it's $60 million a year to get rid of it, that's fine. There's plenty of pork in the budget we can get rid of to fund the changes that can be made with our standard system.
Okay, just 2 more comments. We're going to bring some closure. I can see that we're starting to
Get punchy.
get punchy, exactly. Dr. Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing is kind of interesting, and the experts around me may have some thoughts on this, but English language arts and mathematics are the areas in which Common Core standards have been released and adopted in South Carolina, but there are other areas, there are other curricular, other disciplines, and one is science. And South Carolina has developed its own science standards. They are just in the process of being completed, and the Education Oversight Committee is in the process of signing off on them. Those will be South Carolina developed standards. The question will be how the assessment would be done. But you know, where do you see science going, and what is that a good thing that South Carolina has developed its own standards? Which, by the way, the standards are rated, I think, very highly by Fordham. So it's a different area than the Common Core area. It's the science area.
It's National Council of Teachers of Science that have actually, there's no myth about that. Our standards mirror national standards, and that's really critical because our children have to be able to compete STEM-wise. And I think as we go into next school year, we're looking at those standards, and there were very few changes. Let me again share, very few changes in standards. I think electricity moved to 4th grade, but very few from 4th grade to 3rd grade. But there was a very few standard changes, but they're still the same.
Dr. Smith, I believe you had a comment.
This is certainly a state-by-state decision, but we went through standards in science in Florida, and thought we had a full plate with reading and mathematics on the other side, so kind of pressed on with it. I think the key is you have standards that you can be confident in science to deliver for kids, and again, Fordham is a good institution to give you good feedback on that. So.
Okay, before we thank our panelists and our keynote speakers, I want to move from lunch to dinner, and I saw Dr. Salazzo wanted to respond about the paperclip, I imagine? Say again? We are all interested. I am interested. I'm interested in dinner. Go ahead.
So I didn't see the whole paperclip exercise, but one of the exercises for my daughter who's in kindergarten was have your daughter or son go to the sidewalk and count the number of steps it takes to get to the side door. So my daughter, she's 5, she counts off about, I think it was like 28 steps. I go, great. And then the next thing they ask you to do is ask them if they were to take bigger steps, would it take less steps or more steps? Bigger might make you think more, but she said less, made me happy. She has the math gene. So, clips, one of the exercises we had to do was measure our feet with pennies. Okay, the concept of an inch for a 6-year-old, you might as well forget about it. But a penny, we all know what a penny looks like. Isabel's foot, I think, was 8 pennies. Mine was like 13 pennies. And then we measured Mommy's foot. It was so many pennies. Hey, what do you think if we measure our feet with quarters? Will it be more quarters or less quarters than it was the number of pennies you use? Little minds can't digest centimeters and inches. So but they're getting used to the idea of what? Measurement. Concept.
On that note, I would like to thank Ms. Cindy Ellsbury, Ms. Cindy Ambrose, the 3 teachers. Cindy, could you remind me the names of the 3 teachers? Dr. Eric Smith, Dr. Orrin Smith, Mr. Dylan Jones, Dr. Cindy Ellsbury, Ms. Patty Hamill. Thank you for all attending. Have a safe trip home.